This is roll 1 of the 31st of June 1977 for CBC on the Lougheed story. 7.5 IPS CCIR, 60 cycle crystal lock, Margaret 3, line-up tone will follow at -4 dB. This will be a wild track general atmos taken in Hyde Park. That was Wild Track of the Canadian Premier arriving. You should be able to sync this to the slam of the car door.
Facilities will be beautiful, and they're all on schedule and all within budget, which since we're paying for a fair share of it, we're delighted.
Look at Dick.
Sir.
I think somebody ought to go down and when is Mrs. Thatcher to arrive? I think I'd better meet her.
9:30, sir.
Oh, well, I'll go down and meet her and bring her up. I think that's the first time she comes into this building, I think.
Why?
I can meet her if you like and bring her.
No, I think I'd better meet her. I think that's the courteous thing to do.
We're going to talk with the Premier about the cable.
This will be Mrs. Thatcher arriving in the High Commissioner's room.
Hello, how are you? Very nice to see you. Having missed you when I was over your side of the Atlantic.
This is Mr. Pickering, our Agent General here, Mrs. Thatcher.
And we haven't met either, which also is terrible, isn't it? Except on television. I was so sorry to miss you when I was over
That's
there.
right. I knew that.
How long are you here?
Well, we're on our way to a pretty extended trip to the Soviet Union in the Mideast, so we're leaving tomorrow. But came in about 2 days ago just to get a...
You're going to where? Apart from Moscow?
Well, we're going into Minsk and over into Siberia with the oil and gas
okay,
period,
right up that end.
which will be interesting. But we're delighted.
Now let me think. It's the least cold part of the year.
I think our timing is pretty good.
But it's quite a way around. It is rather nice. You're taking the long way around.
We really are.
Yes.
And we're then we go from there into the Mideast to Saudi Arabia, to Iran, and Israel. And of course, as you know, our province is 85% of Canada's energy, so we have...
I do indeed know.
We're kind of rather interested in the developments that are occurring.
And the law is that the natural resources belong to the province and not to the not to the federation.
That's right. So we have... we're working them out, the sort of things that you're involved in with Scotland right now, I guess.
Indeed, because we reckon ours will last about 40 years. And you've had your gas for years and years, but sometime it must come to an end.
Well, that's our concern, frankly. We want to make sure that we have in place a more diversified economy in our province, because right now we have the appearance of great wealth and prosperity, but I have to look 20 years ahead for the young people in our province, because when the oil and gas declines, as it will, we want to have in place an economy that's not just that dependent as it is now on oil and gas.
In a way, those of us who are only just discovering it are better off.
That's right.
Because we've kept it in the ground. We might not have kept it in the ground had we known it was there. And of course the price has gone up because the cost of extraction is so much greater. But you must have more that it would pay now to extract.
Yes, and our greatest potential long-term position is in the Alberta oil sands, which are a real potential if we can have a technological breakthrough. And that's a key for us. So that's what we're working on, spending a lot of research money on. Because if we do that, we will have a discovery there that'll change the whole North American supply position. But if we don't have it, a breakthrough, technological breakthrough, because what it is taking it out of the sands. We know it's there, 200 feet below, and getting it up and doing it economically.
200 feet, well, that's not too bad, is it?
But it's separating it from the sands.
Yes,
that's the difficulty.
That's the technically expensive part of the operation.
That's what it is. And right now, we're the mining part to go to.
Speed.
Okay.
Did you see that?
Yeah, you got to clap your hand and just like that.
Okay.
Okay.
Mr. Premier, are you prepared to evaluate the London portion of your trip?
Well, the London portion is essentially a preparation for the basic thrust of the trip, which involves, as you know, the Soviet Union as first part of the trip, then the Mideast the second part, and Geneva the third. What we've accomplished here in London in completing it is, first of all, an overview in terms of the world energy scene. We had a good briefing with the British Petroleum Company, who are well known in this field, supply, demand, the future of pricing, the question of the shortages that may exist. We also had an overview with Dow Chemical, who are major investors in our province on world developments in petrochemicals. We met with representatives of the United Kingdom government and also with the leader of the opposition to give us a view of some of the European economic community, some of the factors that will involve the tariff and trade negotiations in Geneva, some of the foreign affairs questions. And then, of course, we had our own individual briefing meetings. So it was a preparation for the trip, and I think just exactly what we wanted and what we needed to have. I don't think we could have conducted the trip without this sort of broad perspective.
Is there anything that you've learned in all of these briefings to lead you to believe that the world oil shortage will come earlier than the expected later part of the 1980s?
At the moment, and I'm not sure of that, there's certainly two distinctive views. There's the views that were presented by Mr. Schlesinger in the United States with President Carter's position that the shortage now of world oil supply will come in the early 1980s rather than the latter 1980s because of the Soviet Union production declining. There's a other point of view that perhaps was to some extent a self-serving position for the U.S. energy policy and should be discounted to a degree. I don't think we're going to find the answer in the Soviet Union, but I think that we're at least seeing two perspectives, and it's of course crucial to Albertans. We make the decisions we have to make on oil sands plants, on heavy oils, on our incentive plan, on the whole resource decisions of our province of Alberta depend upon a trip such as this and an evaluation that comes out of it.
Are you deliberately keeping a low profile on this trip?
Yes, it's not a trip where we're trying to have a high profile at all. It's a matter really of fact-finding, of trying to learn more, because the decisions we make are so important. They're going to affect young Albertans, they're going to affect Albertans for generations, and we have to make them right. And the better knowledge we have, we can't live back on an isolated basis in Alberta, because the decisions that are made in Riyadh, the decisions in Geneva, the decisions in London or in Moscow affect the farmer and the businessman and the oil drilling operator and the citizens of Alberta.
C'est tout, merci. Thank you.
Okay. Fine. Thank you.
Speed.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So far, the Premier has maintained a low profile, and that is deliberate. After all, this is a fact-finding mission, and what Lougheed is doing is... Let's try it again. Okay. So far, the Premier has maintained a very low profile. This is, after all, a fact-finding mission, and what Lougheed is emphasizing, damn it, and what Lougheed is engaged in. All right. So far, the Premier has maintained a very low profile. This is, after all, a fact-finding mission, and what Lougheed is engaged in might be described as subliminal diplomacy. emphasizing to British political and business leaders that Alberta's interests are not necessarily those of the federal government. I'm Alan Hustack in London.
Speed.
So far, the Premier has maintained a very low profile. This is, after all, a fact-finding mission, and what Lougheed is engaged in might be described as subliminal diplomacy. He's telling business and political leaders here in Britain that Alberta's interests are not necessarily those of the federal government. I'm Alan Hustack in London. A fact-finding mission.
Speed. Rolling. Rolling?
Lougheed's engaged.
Okay. Mark
Okay.
it.
So far, the Premier has maintained a very low profile. This is, after all, a fact-finding mission, and what Lougheed is engaged in might be described as subliminal diplomacy. He's telling British business and political leaders that Alberta's interests are not necessarily those of the federal government. I'm Alan Hustack in London.